Hey, it's Patrick Lovell, Truth Bomb riffing the con on Friday, October 17th, 10:06 a.m. and 2023. And I'm somber, um, concerned, and frustrated, and every other, I don't know, manifestation of just like, you got to be fucking kidding me, given the nature of everything that is unfolding right before our eyes and whatever you might be involved with in your own personal life. And, I just, I didn't have anything kind of concretely thought through in my mind as I normally do. I have an approach typically to these truth bombs, but I'm just going to react to kind of what we're all in the midst of, and how everything splinters in different ways and for what reasons and for what outcome, and how still everyone, fucking everyone, can't see the forest for the trees. Look, if you want to weigh in on the conflict in Israel, you should really understand the nature of the conflict in Israel, and then come down on the nature or the side of whatever you stand for in terms of your life and humanity and the history of the world and everything that matters. And quite frankly, like this book I was reading recently, which was a reminder of everything that I used to think about when I was coming up in the world, but life, universe, and everything. And is there a meaning of life? And I'm just about to turn 54. I don't think there is. I don't think there is a meaning of life. I don't think anything fucking matters. I don't think anything matters to anyone except for selfish reasons that basically work towards your own self fucking interest and survivability. And you know what? I guess that's always the way it's been. And if you think about the kind of nature of evolution, yeah, it's it's ruthless. Survival is ruthless. Survival is winner take all, I guess. I you think about history and you think about the nature of what is, and what is everybody missing that they can't see the forest for the trees. Well, let's kind of backdoor into it, based on just like the last 24 hours, maybe 36 hours, 48 hours of kind of how things are playing out, particularly in media, first and foremost, and online and social media, and how everybody kind of goes back to their sort of, I don't know, safe come froms, if you will. And I kind of wanted to comment on the nature of anti-war uh, sort of movements slash pockets of people that get attention, that want to respond. That's kind of like a made for TV scenario where it's like, oh, Israel is about to invade Gaza, which could be a humanitarian crisis because it's an open air prison. And now we're finally talking about that after, I don't know, many years of kind of forgetting about it, but only when the violence arises. And then there's going to be sides, and then there's going to be people that talk about the history and who did what, when, and how, to create the situation where people are going to find a way to choose sides and justify sides because it's some sort of construct of their humanity. And is it really? I don't know. I don't think it really is. And so for people who are like anti war and pro peace, where were they in stopping Hamas from creating a situation that dominoed what we're in the midst of in this latest incarnation of it, which is what, 7 days old, which is of course over the story of like 30 years, 40, 75, depending, and each one of those were kind of moments. But I'm using it as a backdoor to get into showing what I hope many of you might just fucking consider for once is, for example, you know, look, the open air prisons, a monstrosity, and apartheid and all of the things that come with it, um, you know, antithetical to what any of those who understand who the Jewish people are and what the nature of democracy is, can fathom. Yeah, it's absurd. The whole thing is absurd. And so, for people who are like, you know, Israel has to stop its genocidal campaign into rooting out Hamas. And what is exactly Hamas? Well, Hamas was the elected leadership of Gaza, which is a splinter terrorist group that was created as a militant group as a response to pretty much everything that's taken place over the last 75 years. Same with Hezbollah, and same with the Israeli Defense Force. People are fighting for land that either have historical connections to or it evolved there based on their history. And then there was a big event called the Holocaust. Yeah, and the Holocaust was born in Europe as a result of 1,000 years of pogroms and anti-Semitism because of the nature of all of the things that humanity is tied to, most particularly corruption. And yeah, 6 million Jews died. Does that matter? Well, it matters to me. But does it really matter in the grand scheme of things, in life, universe, and in everything, right? Does life matter? Is there a purpose? Well, I guess it's the purpose you make for yourself. But at the same time, at the end of the day, we're going to end up a lot of the times without a vision and without a commitment to truth and justice that's going to lead to chaos and manipulation and insidious betrayal that happens all the time when you don't live true to your character based on your ideals. And if your actions aren't aligned with your principles, you're going to have chaos. And that's what we have in Gaza right now, because I don't know if there's necessarily good actors in power. I don't know if there's good guys. Do I think there's good guys and people that have yet to actually form that are children and teenagers in Gaza? Of course. Do they deserve to be slaughtered because those that have gone the way of Hamas and the actors of terrorism, should they pay for their crimes? In a world built on, or a society built on the integrity of law, no, because you should be able to ferret them out and you should be able to hold them accountable if the law worked the way the law is supposed to work. But in a place like Gaza or the West Bank, or just in generally, the region, if you will, the strong arm is what ultimately wins throughout the Middle East. And so for everybody who is, completely horrified with the genocide of the apartheid state of Israel, who weren't there to stop the terrorist attacks last week, where 165 concert goers at a peace festival or rave were murdered and just shot down, and all other sorts of terrible tragedies. You weren't there to stop it, and you weren't protesting then to stop it. You're just reacting to something you think you understand, and you're kind of going with like the rest of humanity in this sort of kind of globule kind of thing, like atoms and all of the other symmetry of the nature of DNA that that goes a specific direction based on what? Based on your come from, based on what your background is, based on how you were born, how your ideas were formed, and everything else. But does that give you the upper hand of morality in reacting to genocide when you didn't stop what's going to create the genocide? No, it doesn't. So you're not on a high platform, okay? Now, guys, look, I've got a Pink Floyd shirt on. I'm just wearing it incidentally. I will give, Roger Waters all the credit in the world. Roger Waters has been consistently, incredibly, tirelessly, since he's gotten into the situation, critical of Israel. I don't think he's anti-Semitic. Not at all. I think he's anti-fascist. And what he was seeing was a police state and a lot of brutality and a lot of underhanded type of stuff that went on, especially with the West Bank settlers that were, provided all sorts of resources and money and that sort of thing for decades by billionaire interests. And I've been, of the same mindset that this isn't going to end well. And what did I do? Did I try to stop Israel from everything that's done? Well, I've been critical from the sidelines, from my computer, from my comments. Did I go do anything heroic by creating a movement to try to foster something that would be able to prevent Netanyahu from being able to have this kind of military industrial, high-tech state that's connected to, all sorts of bad intent, whether it's right-wing billionaires or, quite frankly, the theocracy of Saudi Arabia, who I put at the top of my list as my enemy, if you want to know the truth. because they got away with 9/11. But does that mean that Saudi Arabia created 9/11? I think they had I mean, maybe because of the theocracy and the Sunniism and the Wahhabism and all of that kind of history as well. But I think Saudi went along with the ride with whoever was in charge to be able to manifest what ultimately became something very beneficial for the oil industry and Saudi as the swing producer for everything that emanates based on everything that I've been trying to make you aware of in these truth bombs, which I guess are sermons. And the only way that I can possibly communicate to try to get everybody wrap their heads around what is, so that we're not in situations like this. But here we are, because most of you are reactionary idiots that don't have a fucking clue how the world works. And then you get into camps, and then it creates more and more, I don't know, it elevates, the hysteria. It elevates, the reactionary circus that can be manipulated by people that, probably want a specific outcome if you want to know the truth. Yeah, I'm a little bit, I don't know about whatever, the role of the Israeli army. I just saw a thing on Vox that I thought was really interesting because, yeah, I think that the Israeli army was, spending a whole lot of its time protecting the settlers in the West Bank because that was politically expedient for Netanyahu. And, maybe they just got, I don't know, lackadaisical towards Gaza, and boy, did that bite them, which shows that you can't live, in a police state in eternal sort of, five ready state of alert, 24/7 and get it right 100% of the time. It would seem to be better to try to foster a peace and live in cohesion, kind of like what we've done in the United States. But how did we get there in the United States? But did the Indians, the North American Indians, have a say in how we developed and evolved? No, I mean, they got brutalized. Genocide. Yeah, that was genocide with the North American Indians. And oh yeah, when we forced them into kind of, camps and that sort of thing, not too dissimilar to the partition land in Israel, but the United States is huge. And so they could kind of disappear, right? And they really didn't have any leverage. And were they sitting on tons and tons of, resources, timber and oil that they could leverage, the decision-making process of the power apparatus of, the United States? No, not necessarily. They certainly got a leg up in gambling, which I don't know if that was in their best interest, but obviously was for some. That's another story. But I mean, the evolution, the manifest destiny. I mean, this whole thing was a war to begin with. The United States was fighting battles from the very beginning of the revolution, and it never stopped, quite frankly. But what does that have to do with, Hamas and people's reactions in Israel and everything else? Well, look, people, and justifiably so, have emotional reactions to things that are viscerally connected to what their experience is. So, for example, African Americans, I could imagine, might have a alliance, if you will, with people in Gaza and the West Bank, because effectively it's a police state, right? And you can relate to that, whether it's, the African Americans were, kind of forced into partition land, quite frankly, throughout the history of the United States, through redlining and everything else. We didn't have a blended society until the civil rights, movement fought for it. And the civil rights movement wasn't possible without the Civil War. And what did the Civil War do? The Civil War shed so much blood and treasure in this country. It was phenomenal to break the grip of bondage and to create the 13th Amendment, which was part and parcel to, in order to form a more perfect union. For all of you who are like, yeah, you know what, the United States' founding fathers were a bunch of landowning gentry who were never in it for, its principles, easy for you to say, even though it's true in the 3/5 statute. But I've said it all the time, there were abolitionists from the beginning that, had the seeds that would lead to, the movement that would ultimately not allow the South to secede, and it would break the chains of slavery. And oh yeah, by the way, during that time period, we had robber barons. And we had to have another fight to stop that, which was Teddy Roosevelt's trust busting, when people organized to have progressive movements that ultimately picked up the baton and moved forward and everything else, and to kind of ultimately bring it to kind of a sort of intersection with Hamas and Gaza and everything else. I had always been hoping that there was going to be a time where somebody in the Palestinian arena would have the sort of, I don't know, intelligence and commitment and a sort of fostering of a genuine partner in peace that would maybe emanate some sort of civil rights like movement, not unlike what Martin Luther King was able to do in the United States based on everything that preceded him. But unfortunately, that never happened. And unfortunately, everything that I've been explaining to you that really is our world since I'm going to call it 9/11 is when this latest chapter and the sequence and everything we're in the midst of has happened that none of you, very few of you understand, and even fewer willing to do anything about. But yet, so many of you are willing to just immediately go to some emotional reaction to go protest and burn, what, Israeli flags because you support Hamas, because maybe you're anti-globalist and, you're like, these are all part and parcel to the same sort of divisions of the power elite, so to speak. And, they are enemies. And so we're all in, um, you know, um, solidarity together and that sort of thing. To what ends? Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of truth to that. There really is a lot of truth to that. When you understand the history of Israel, I mean, first and foremost, Israel was born because it was manifesting before because of all of the anti-Semitism that happened for centuries and a millennia in Europe, and it was kind of well on its way. But there was kind of also some leveraged scenarios with England and the Middle East, and then ultimately what led to the Balfour Declaration, and but things didn't really go into a kind of a heavy exodus and quite frankly the migration, just like what we've seen out of Syria into Western Europe. At that time period, it was Jews out of World War II, particularly because of the Holocaust, to Israel. And was it fair for the Palestinians that lived there? No, they didn't really get a say. Nobody asked them, hey, is it okay with you if we bulldoze where you were living and the livelihood that you made and the infrastructure that you made in your homes and everything else to make way for a problem that we can't solve in Europe? No, they weren't asked. No, they were forced out. Yeah, there was no question about that. They did. And so, what is my opinion on the whole thing? Well, I'm a Reformed Jew. I was born in a family that is complicated as all of our families. My father is from a Lutheran German family whose mother, after my dad's father died, after serving in 20 years of World War II in Korea, came back and got hit by a drunk driver. She goes into kind of a deep, religious sort of scenario where it's like, because everything got lost, she becomes this Christian Scientist. She becomes kind of, evangelical, eventually lands back on Catholicism. Catholicism, my dad's side of the family is all Christian, and quite frankly, Texas Christian at that. My mother's side of the family, evolved from the pogroms, or I should say exodus, or migrated out of Ukraine to the United States on both sides of the family. So I'm Russian Jewish, right? On that side of the family. And the influences in my life were all of them, on both sides of the family and everything that entailed, in addition to the history of World War II and Nazism and, the final solution to my identity and everything was kind of built and molded by all this stuff. And so in the end, because my grandfather was such an incredibly inspiring and, huge influence on my life, and he was all in on Israel, I was all in on Israel. But I'm a very pragmatic guy, and I thought about it, and I'm still all in on Israel, but mostly as a democratic state. But I also believe there has to be a homeland for the Jewish people, considering the freaking disastrous history of the Jews of 2,000 years of fucking suffering. And so does that justify them, causing suffering for Palestinians? No, not in my mind. But there's no genuine partner for peace. But it's ultimately what I wanted to just, again, bring full circle and front and center. First of all, none of what's going on in the Middle East right now, or has been for the past, 75 years, quite frankly, is fully possible without fossil fuel, without the interests of, really how important, all of the oil producing states of OPEC are, but particularly in the Middle East, and particularly as Saudi as a swing producer. The entire world's economy depends on it, and so does the American hegemony as the world's reserve currency. All of which plays into what I continue to reveal to you, which was the largest criminal conspiracy and cover up in history. 2008 was the largest racketeering fraud in history that went on haywire because our system is filled with a bunch of freaking insane, I don't know, a lot of people call them sociopaths, and I think they are. And I think that's what happens when you gamble all the time. I'm not against gambling, but I don't like to gamble myself if I can't afford to lose. But unfortunately, we have a very, our entire economy is predicated on gambling, which I always thought was really interesting. And I thought it was beautiful when I considered that there was risk reward, because the people that succeeded were the people who had the right ideas, who could do the right stuff, that, elevated to absolute genius solutions and needs for society. That's what I saw capitalism doing versus, what it broke out of it broke its own bondage, right? Capitalism broke the monarchies, and all of the the families and the lineage, and Western European history, and the aristocracy and all of that kind of stuff, and it broke the chains of being under working on the land and serfdom and all of those things, and it created the innovation of those that could see the solution to problems and create ingenious products, whether it was the Industrial Revolution, or we went from oil and blubber to oil, and that evolution that broke that paradigm at the time, which took what, I don't know, probably 40-50 years in the process, to create what we've been living on for the last 150 years, that have put us in a situation to where, because of our emissions and because of our science tells us that this is not sustainable. But now we're on the verge of World War III, that's connected to the situation to where we have literally nothing but griftopia all over the Western world, and quite frankly China too, that just creates this new aristocracy, which, if you listen to Yanis Varoufakis, has evolved into a post-capitalist world of techno-feudalism, which is just right back to where we were, which goes to my mindset, the great prophet David Byrne, who said, same as it ever was. And he's right. And like Mark Twain, the other prophet, said, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And so what I'm trying to tell you, and I'm trying to get through to your thick fucking skulls of everybody who doesn't understand what's going on. And the ones I'm not talking to are the ones that control the system. And they know that I know how the fucking system works. What I continue to tell you is Federal Reserve Act 13.3, the lender of last resort capacity for the United States through the Federal Reserve, that is intended to be able to be there for us in terms of crisis. Otherwise, the whole system should be able to work on its own, because we have smart people that do things, that can finance things, that do things right, that we have, brilliant people that do brilliant things, that don't do fucking corruption and fraud. That's the idea of the law, you idiots. And what happens is, when you don't have the law and you don't have a vision of separation of powers like the founders did, and this many 2.5 centuries later practically, that we didn't evolve in order to form a more perfect union using our intelligence to understand right and wrong based on character and dignity and integrity, and instead we went to the dark side, which is what? Hypocrisy, duplicity, complicity, betrayal. And that's what the system has done to us. So there's really no good guys, is what I'm trying to tell you. And so when I see people that are like, John Cusack, I see all over the place, like, oh my God, we can't allow genocide, and I've got to go to these things, and I've got to react, and I got to be in front of the cameras, and I got to, do my thing, because this is where I've come from, because this is my worldview. You know what he ignored? Tens of millions of people that got set up and destroyed in the collateral damage that was financial terrorism, that destroyed fucking families, that destroyed people's lives. And they did it illegally. And all these schmarmy fucks, they don't listen, they don't know the details, because they're too busy reacting and, being social horror media people, I guess. And I'm not just, because I like John Cusack for the most part, but you know what? I try to reach out to him to let him know this information, just like I'm trying to break through your bubble to let you know this information. And the collateral damage that we see in the streets, yeah, there's a lot of people that are drug addicts. There's a lot of people that can't help themselves. There's a lot of people that got there from a lot of places that weren't exactly what I'm saying. But there are a lot that are. And there's a lot of things in the United States right now that don't add up. For example, we have, commercial real estate in places like San Francisco that are 60%, available, and yet prices are through the roof. And there's homelessness like you wouldn't believe. Why is that? because of what I'm fucking telling you. Because we provided free money to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars to the financial apparatus, who decided the way to fix the problem was to make the rich ultimately richer, and they did that through stocks and real estate. And what they created was quantitative easing to purchase off the books. This is where monetary policy and fiscal policy, in my opinion, intersect, even though all of the great economists will tell you that's not a possibility. But banknotes purchasing assets that get merged into the bank so that they can lend is exactly what that is. And then we sell the bonds around the world to what? The producers of oil, quite frankly. So it's all this kind of thing where it's like, okay, where's the value? If we can produce tens of trillions of dollars, first of all, the full faith and credit of the United States is exactly that. The currency is premised on the faith, and everybody uses it because it's the medium of exchange. It's what you get paid on, so that you can do what? So that you can buy a place to live, provide for your family, support yourself, the energy that you need to get around to your job, and then all of the things that come with it, particularly food and clothing, and of course, technology, right? So the bottom line is, does money grow on trees? No, it comes out of digits. But does that mean it's not worth something, or does it have any value? Of course it has value. It's connected to the full sort of engine, the economic engine that, is everything from resources, that we need and everything that we do to, the productive capacity and the ingenuity and the technological capacity and everything else. And ultimately, for example, going back to Israel, Israel made itself, what's the word that they say? If you want to become something of value, of tool, you've got to make yourself to where they can't live without you, basically. And Israel has done that to serve all of the power be that in this international fucking situation with intelligence, and not just in military intelligence in the way that operates, but intelligence for AI and high tech and everything else. They made themselves invaluable, right? That they're just as valuable as oil, because the petro-producing states need the technology and the military industrial to police their own people, quite frankly. Democracy, I think, is antithetical to all of the centralization of power. And so we're not fighting for democracies. We're not fighting for liberty. We're not fighting for justice. We're fighting for what is this never-ending saga of this chess game that's all predicated on fossil fuel and financialization and everything else that enables the central bank to do what it did. Again, I can assure you that the statutes of Federal Reserve Act 13.3 weren't written such that you could provide unlimited liquidity to bankrupt and solvent institutions that got that way through fraud, which is what we show you in the con. And fraud is not shenanigans. Fraud is deception. It's illegal theft by deception, which is criminal. And that's not hyperbole. That means you get sentenced, you go to jail, you have the money that you made taken back, you're irrelevant. But that's not what we did. We doubled down, triple down, quadruple down, and everything else. And now we're in this situation. And again, like I tell you, it's 2023. And yeah, is it interesting that there was, all of these biblical references to Armageddon and all of these, why can't I think of the fucking term right now? It'll come to me in a minute. Whatever, man. Where it all ends in it fosters the second coming. I use all of that stuff as an analogy because my second coming, the rebirth, the redo, the new renaissance, all of it, and we've, humanity's gone through this thing millions of times throughout its history, okay? And we're only like I don't know what, we're less. I've always used to love those scenarios where it's like humanity came on the world. If we were looking at it as New Year's Eve, in a 24-hour clock, the last minute in 10 seconds would be the entire history of mankind, right? I mean, we're not even an eye blink in the history of time, and I've heard it from Giannis Varoufakis, and I agree, and I grew up with it. It's like Star Trek had this wonderful sort of like composite of humanity in the USS Enterprise, but we all foster and get along, and we have these, ideals of shared humanity, right? You can have different sorts of ways you do things, but there's like, we all have to eat, we all have to function, we all need to survive through, medical, I don't know, maintenance, if you will, and we need to have technology to improve the lives of agriculture and all of those things that foster the ability for us to live vibrantly, not to live like we did thousands and thousands of years ago as slaves. And that's the whole thing. It's like so those that connect with Black Lives Matter, with any sort of group that's been targeted and the downtrodden, and they try to fight back. A lot of these people naturally are inclined to want to side with Hamas without thinking that Hamas doesn't give a flying fuck about terrorism. This is kind of the, about humanity, because they're living for the next life. Same with ISIS, same with these insane extremists in religion. They don't live for this life, they live for the next life. And so if there's any if there's any meaning to life, from where I'm sitting, it's always been to provide. It's always been to create value. It's always been to work to create a nexus, a healthy, safe place for you and your family. And what is value? Value could be so many things like medicine. Value could be everything from stuff that we depend on, air, the air we breathe, the water we drink, everything that we need to sustain ourselves, which is literally on, its last stand because of what we've had to do with poisoning the world's ecosystem based on our dependence on fossil fuel. And another thing that I'll say to all of the folks that go and they protest against Israel and this police state and everything else, where have you been against MAGA? Why aren't you and millions of you standing up and meeting MAGA one-on-one? I know there's a lot of you that were, anti, fascist that have been, fighting the good fight for a long time. And a lot of you had kind of like a stand in Portland, and we had the dark state, the military apparatus, these goons that came back from Afghanistan that were hired from, Blackwater, that are trained professional military people that round you up. And it's hard to fight that. It really is. It's almost impossible to fight that. But then it kind of shatters and it goes a million different ways. And what kind of society do we want to live in? I want to live in a society that puts liberty and justice for all above all else, that lives up to the truth, like Martin Luther King said, live up to what you put on paper. You have to have the law accountable. You have to hold power to account. You have to have common sense, and you don't use prisons to arrest a group of people that you set up to fail, that you're going to create, literally a profit motive based on systemic racism. That's what we've done. And again, a lot of you think that's what's going on in Israel. And to a degree, it is. And that sucks. And I hate it beyond comprehension. But you need to fight to find Palestinians that are willing to rise up to say, yeah, Jews, we know that the Holocaust happened and that Israel was your only life raft, and it sucks, and we're so sad for you, and we understand your pain, and we don't want you to create that pain for us. Can we work together for our children to create a world that makes sense? We've pretty much kind of done it in the United States, right? It was like that for most of my life until 9/11 fostered in everything that's taken place since in 2008. It's the flip side of the coin. And what is 9/11? I think it's this deep industrial military, fossil fuel apparatus, Wall Street financialization that liked the way that paradigm works. They weren't willing to move to the next step. And I think somebody in power that could stand to benefit from it immensely allowed Al-Qaeda to do what they did. Did Al-Qaeda get lucky and they couldn't have predicted that, the towers would collapse? I don't know, maybe. I think that's a possibility. Do I think somebody got inside and, line like Israel, like a lot of the truthers want to blame Israel and the deep state antics on, putting, dynamite on every single floor, and then I don't think that happened. In fact, I know it. I'm pretty sure it didn't happen. I've talked to a whole lot of people throughout the ages that are architects and engineers and everything else. And yeah, heat could create the situation to where it imploded upon itself, and they were designed to fall the way they did. Okay? So that, until somebody gives me something different than what I've seen for 20 years, what I think is just that we knew exactly where the terrorists were. We allowed them, we knew who was funding them. We allowed them to do what they did for the outcome that happened. And who's they? I don't know for sure. I think it was Darth Vader 1.0. I think it was Dick Cheney and his apparatus. And I call him Dick Cheney or Darth Vader 1.0 because Darth Vader 2.0, which is a much scarier version of all the stuff that I've said, is Larry Fink at BlackRock, who got put into position to basically reboot the world for the bad guys based on the collapse of the world global economy that was set up by this ginormous fucking fraud that destroyed tens of millions of people that are still living with collateral damage that none of you seem to give a flying fuck about. No, you don't. You don't care about liberty and justice for all. You don't care about the integrity of law. You're tools in the full circus. What you do is you react to what everybody else is reacting to without seeing the core tumor of the problem that I'm trying to eradicate, to usher in the clean new deal that enables us to have the ultimate enlightenment, the ultimate renaissance. Why? Because at the end of the day, guys, cooperation and technology and all of these incredible innovations by the human mind and achievement can make this world make sense. And we can live within the construct of, having competition and ultimately great ideas come forward with being able to have the integrity of the law. And quite frankly, capitalism in a way that there is risk reward. Because to all of you socialists out there, and by the way, yeah, I do like the idea of democratic socialism, but I'm a capitalist because I'm a producer and I got to depend on getting money to make projects happen, as well as if we want to create a renaissance. And so, yeah, I'm not going to ask you for money right now. I've already done it a million times, and maybe we'll find a way to get there. But the bottom line is that, yeah, in an age of dark money, particularly post Citizens United, listen, man, billionaires spend billions to loot trillions. And the only way we're going to get the power of, for, and by the people, a government of, by, and for the people back is if you join me. But I kind of like, I'm getting to the point where I don't give a fuck. Because it's like nobody cares and the truth has no value. We created the con, www.thecon.tv. I mean, literally tens of millions of people should see this so that they understand what the fuck is going on. And it's like, I have to spoon feed people all the time. Okay, so they're like, well, what do I do when I see it? What do I do then? Well, when you understand what the problem is, you join me, and then together we basically foster in a political solution through the democratic process using the lessons that we've learned that no, you don't live in a system that integrity, the law is above all else. And again, I'll remind you, for those of you who watch my Truth Bombs, and thank you for doing so, please like and subscribe and share. Please try to, help me groundswell this, because everything the United States government is proving and demonstrating in the case of Donald Trump, that everything he's guilty of, which I say he's guilty of, and much more than what he's actually being indicted for, proves everything I'm saying. Except they didn't do it for the financial system. Everything that Donald Trump is involved with, whether it was defrauding the United States, using racketeering, using deceptive acts and practices and illegal documentation, ultimately with corrupt judges and corrupt attorneys, that's exactly what Wall Street did in numbers that would blow your fucking mind. To get to the situation where they blew up the world, it's called smash and grab. The fucking, imperial powers of England and France and Portugal and Spain, they did this stuff all throughout the world, okay? There's a whole way you loot countries of their natural resources and their human resources by setting them up to fail. And when you have corruption, it's really easy to do that because people are stupid, because people are greedy, because people are ignorant, because people are weak, because people are cowards. It does take courage to have a revolutionary zeal in the manner that our founding fathers had, and same with the French Revolution that went haywire. And you know what? People are imperfect, okay? It's never going to be perfect. But I'm giving you an option. I've got my hands out. Am I, Moses or Jesus? No. But I am leading a crusade to exodus from corruption to create a resurrection of the American dream. And I use these, religious metaphors because we all understand it, because it really is that easy at the end of the day. And yet we're fractured into a million fucking pieces where people don't know their North Star. They don't understand. Do I want Hamas destroyed? Yeah. Do I want the Palestinian people uh, brutalized and genocide. No, I wish they wouldn't go to the side of Hamas. And I wish that somebody would come up and say, yeah, guys, this whole thing has been a fucking joke from the beginning. Do you realize that in Israel, prior to all of this stuff, we had seen, and it happened on cameras, in mainstream media in the United States, but we had seen the Israeli people that, were made up of all of the Israeli people, all the professional class, everybody from the military, their pilots, their doctors, their scientists, everybody was in the streets protesting Netanyahu's corruption, protesting his overreach with the Supreme Court. They wanted to live true to a democratic ideal. They proved it. And then now we've got war, which is going to be beneficial to the autocratic regimes and the police state regimes and the apartheid regimes. This is how it works. We need to have a monumental grassroots effort to rise and purge corruption and drown the fascism that it fuels. That's what we have to do. And you've got to do it with the facts. You can't react and start going, in my opinion, like making this the same thing it's always been. Because that's only going to ignite further and further turmoil. And at this point, I kind of throw my hat in the ring and I'm like, you know what? It's on. Let it be the full-on war that we've seen coming for like what? Since the last war? Because it's humanity and nobody ever really wants to figure it out. Because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Democracy is the answer. It really is. But you have to have the rule of law with democracy and you have to hold power to account. And that's what I'm trying to do in supposedly the greatest democracy that the world has ever known. Do I think President Biden is a much better alternative than whatever the second bout with Trump might be? You bet your ass. The fact that Trump is walking around, breathing free air, having not been in prison is an absolute joke to me. It's a failure of the Department of Justice. There is no way in hell this guy should not already be in prison. Should we break up MAGA? Is MAGA a bunch of protesters that are actually fighting for liberty and justice for all? Are they fighting for the principles of America? Are they fighting for the founding, liberty for everybody and integrity of the law? No, of course not. No, man, they're fueled by libertarian billionaires that want to create a race war so that they have white supremacy. That's what they are. Whether or not those in MAGA really fully understand that. They want to go back to, I don't know, pretty much the United States before the civil rights movement was able to create the modern world or America that we live in. What country do you want to live in? I know what country I want to live in. And again, this falls on deaf ears every single time because you're not listening. You've got your head in your sand, or you're getting on the right side, or you're reacting in a hysterical, non-rational, logical way, and everybody wants to make everybody else the villain, and yet everybody's a villain, and actually, everybody wants to outdo each other on misery. Why don't we just fucking say enough? Which is exactly what we say in the con. Enough. What we have to do is we have to get tens of millions of people together. If you, me, and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in decency, in dignity, in integrity, and in sustainability and beauty, if we come together and we are in unity, we will defeat the misery of tyranny through the Clean New Deal, which reboots a society that, we have to have. A rising tide raises all ships. And it's better than the alternative of the fossil fuel paradigm that is destroying us all, that got away with murder, that made the new, what we call techno-feudalism, indoctrinated with the the sort of global financialism and everything else. Look, I'd like to give you, my go-to, like, let's get up and let's do this, but I'm so disgusted with everything. I'm so disgusted by everybody. I have no faith in you. I don't. You're not capable of it. You'd rather let the bad guys win. That's all you do. You'd rather hide from the truth. That's all you do. You're afraid to be courageous. That's all you do. Why do I say that? Because I've been doing this for over a year and a half. I spent 13 years and millions of dollars to put together the $29 trillion truth that the system suppressed, that you can't find your way to because you're too busy doing what you do until it's too late. Do you mean anything if nothing means anything to you? No. Do I think I can get tens of millions of people by telling everybody that they're pathetic? No. I'm trying to encourage those who aren't because I know that not everybody is. I know that there's 1 in 100 of you that are willing to fight for what's right, that are willing to make your life mean something, that are willing to come out of this insanity that could destroy tens of millions of people. It could. It might. But we got to be there to be able to pick up the reins and force what we have to do in the United States. Because quite frankly, if Israel didn't have the United States, if Israel didn't have the carrier groups and the backing and the intelligence and the support and ultimately our consumption for Saudi Arabian oil, do you think they'd be fighting a different battle? Yeah. Do I think that they could probably win? Yeah, I do, because they did in 1967 and they did in 1973 when things weren't as evolved as they are. The Israelis are insanely smart and committed because they know what happens if they don't fight for their survival. That's why I think they could actually win. Do I think they're going to win now with all of these other things involved? Yeah, I do. To what ends? I'm not sure. I think the Israeli people need to have the same battle with their government that I am, which they were. And we have to come together and we have to build this, this cacophony, this genius that we know we're all capable of. But those of you in the system and those of you that are the professional class, those of you that have betrayed us, those of you that let your paycheck allow you to destroy everybody else, you're the ones who created this problem. I know you think that there was nothing you can do about it. I know that you're like, look, man, I don't make the rules. Don't hate the player, hate the game. That's easy to say until it all comes down on your head, like it did mine in 2008. It destroyed me. And I don't want to quit, but at the same time, I want to quit. People, tell me, should we quit? We haven't even started. I guess I'll just have to wait to see how many people respond and get involved and want to, help and donate their time or their money and want to get on board and become, warriors for justice with me. And if you buy what I'm selling, because what I'm telling you is the whole fucking truth, man, the whole burrito. I guess I got to leave it up to the market like I always have. And I don't have a whole lot of faith in the market because I think you're all owned. And I think a vast majority of us are people that will always bend the knee to tyranny and be complicit in, that which you get paid by. That's not courage. And I can guarantee you that's not liberty and justice for all. Yeah, it's fucking confusing, all right.